Excited. What's up, Psychonauts? Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have Katie Leiher with me. Katie has been sitting in ceremony since 2015 with a wide variety of medicines, both medicinal medicine, plant medicine, and what did we decide to call them before we hopped on? Just man-made?
I sometimes refer to them as man-made medicines. Yeah.
Man-made medicines. Okay, which we were going to dive into, definitely. I am so excited. The conversations that we've had prior to recording, I know this episode is going to be so good. So welcome, Katie, to the
Mm.
podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun already.
I know. And I'm like, we've talked about such like deep stuff within our like first initial conversations. And I'm so grateful I've gotten to talk to you more than once.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd love to start with like what brought you into plant medicine ceremonies and like how did you find the people? Did you feel safe within those spaces? Like tell me your story.
Yeah, so I have actually an interesting story of how I first found plant medicine. I was going through an interesting shift in my life, and I was going through a divorce, and I was kind of like closing down one business and shifting into, I don't know, kind of the next phase of my life. I had owned a CrossFit gym. So I was like leaving sort of like the fitness industry. I was leaving behind a relationship. And I started going to this spiritual group that I had found online. And a woman there was like, I think you really need to go check out this sound healing. I had no idea what a sound healing was. So I was like, okay, I go check out this sound healing. I'm laying there feeling like my body vibrating. And I'm like, what is this? I mean, I had never, other than maybe going to like a yoga class, I had never experienced anything um, like in the spiritual realm really whatsoever. So after the sound healing, I go up to the guy who is leading the sound healing, Jason, and I was like, I need more of this in my life. I don't know what you do, who you are, like, but I need this. I could feel that it was something that was going to help me
Mm,
heal and like move forward in my life. So I started doing energy work with him for about a year. So a whole year, I went religiously once a week for like 3 to 4 hours at a time. And he was doing energy healing with me, energy work, anything from like sound to crystals, Reiki. There was like all sorts of modalities kind of interwoven. And I was so fortunate that I got to work with this person, this practitioner for an entire year. So I felt super
mm,
comfortable. He knew my story. He was witnessing my evolution. Um, yeah, I was just incredibly safe with this person, right? After spending a year with, like, say, your therapist, like at that point, you feel really good with that person.
yeah.
So I had, through the course of this time, I had started taking a yoga teacher training course, and I got close with my yoga teacher, and she was like, "Oh, are you going to be going to ceremony next week?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I talked to Jason about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I think you're ready. Like, come to ceremony." And I'm like, "Great." No idea what ceremony meant. In my heart, I'm like, "Okay, we're just gonna like sit around with a bunch of bowls and maybe like sing and chant and like hold hands and there'll be some smudging." That was what I thought ceremony meant. Like, I had never done any type of drugs in my life. Maybe I'd smoked pot like 5 times, in
Hmm.
college or something. But I just wasn't somebody that knew anything about psychedelics. I had never even heard of ayahuasca before.
Hmm.
So I show up, and I'm like chatting with my yoga teacher. She's sitting next to me, and she turns to me and she's like, "So are you ready to trip balls?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, what are you talking
No.
about? She's like, "So we're doing ayahuasca. It's a psychedelic tea. We're about to trip for the next like 10 hours. You have no idea what you're getting into." And I'm like, "No." I'm literally just like shaking my head. I'm looking at the door. I'm like, "Can I get out of here? Like, can I just like grab my stuff and like get out of here?" I don't know what's going on. I didn't do any research, which is so not like me.
Hmm.
So I end up just like, I surrendered. I was like, okay, there's a reason I'm here. There's a reason this is happening. I do really trust Jason. Like, he knows me. He's held me through so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason that I'm here, and like I'm next to Jody, like I'm next to these safe people, right? So I just surrendered to it, and I laid back, took my tea, and honestly, it was the most beautiful experience I've ever had in my entire life. Like,
Mm-mm.
I just remember grandmother welcomed me in with open arms. Like, I could just cry thinking about it. My whole body just dissolved down, every last cell dissolved down and like went out into the ethers. And I just felt myself become one with the entire earth. I felt
Mm-hmm.
myself in the jungles, in the waters, all just one with the entire earth, and so at peace and so in love. And I remember coming out of that experience and being like, oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, grandmother, for being gentle on me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was just like so perfect and profound. So that was how I found plant medicine.
So she found you. She was like,
Yes,
"You're coming."
exactly. Exactly. And it's so interesting because I always tell people that ask me about it now, like, I never would have thought this out. I wasn't the person who was researching, trying to go to Peru looking for like it. That wasn't a part of my existence. I was just really like trying to put one foot in front of the other each day. I
Mm-hmm.
was in like a transitionary period of my life. Um, yeah, I wasn't looking to like break down huge barriers and like look at my trauma. That wasn't
Yeah.
something I was even aware of at the time. So she really did find me. Yeah, it was beautiful. So that's how I initially found my way into plant medicines. And then from there, I had such a beautiful, profound experience. I stayed with that community. Um, Jason kept doing ceremonies for a really long time in that yoga space. So we were there once a month. So I probably attended ceremonies every month for about a year or two with
Oh wow.
him. And then I kind of felt that calling, that urge to go to Peru. So I went to Peru for 2 weeks. I did that intensive experience in the jungle with the Shipibo. Incredible, incredible experience. There's nothing like it, being sort of in the motherland. And then, came back here and was sort of like, how do I integrate everything that I just experienced
Yeah.
being back in this society? So after that period was when my partner and I, Chris, started facilitating here.
Oh wow.
Um, but it's interesting because he we came back from Peru, and shortly after he got really interested in psilocybin, and he started sitting with that medicine, working with that medicine, serving it here and there, and then he started doing these ceremonies around it. So it was really interesting because we had been sitting with grandmother and
Mm.
really working with that medicine, and then there was like this shift that took place, and then it was like psilocybin, and he started doing these ceremonies. And yeah, I wouldn't say I was like called to facilitate. I wasn't like, I want to facilitate these ceremonies. It was like, there's a need. He has this really masculine energy,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like wanting to bring in like the safety, the love, the nurturing, like the feminine. So I kind of came in to try to balance out some of his masculine
Mm.
energy.
Love that. Um,
Yeah,
I'm curious about the 2 week experience in Peru. Like what did that look like? I've never done anything like that.
it was wild. Yeah, so Chris was the one who found this beautiful place. It's called Temple of the Way of Light.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they do a really beautiful job of honoring the culture there and the Shu people. Like, they've been handing down, through their lineage, this medicine and this work for, years. Like, the maestros, or like the teachers, the facilitators, however you want to refer to these people, like they would apprentice or sit with the masters for like 10, 20 years before they'd even be allowed to facilitate a
Wow.
ceremony. So they really, and they go out and they sit with the medicine. in the jungle. They have to do their own dieta with just that medicine for like at least a month. Some of them go as long as a year, where they're
Mm,
literally just working with that one medicine. And then the medicine kind of like gifts them with their song, which is the
mm,
ekaros. So when you're in these ceremonies with these people, it's like you can just feel the depth of the connection. You can just
mhm.
feel like this has been running through their blood, their veins, their cells for generation upon generation. Like you can just feel the depth of their connection with this
Mm.
medicine and with the jungle. But then also just like how compassionate they are that they want to share it with you, right? Because like they
Yeah,
could just be like, oh, we don't want to deal with these
right.
crazy foreigners, right? But they really like they care. So it was really a beautiful and humbling experience for me because I had started doing the work out here in New Jersey, and then had this sort of like contrast where I'm going and doing the work in the jungle. So it was really interesting for me because like anything, you start to build a little bit of a reality around something, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, this is the way ceremony is run. There's these beautiful instruments. This is the facilitators. This is how they do things. And you kind of got, you get used to that.
Yeah.
This is how they do energy work. And then I go into the jungle and it was like everything was done completely differently. And I was like, oh, like I remember my first experience, the first ceremony. I think we did 7 or 10 ceremonies while
Yeah.
we were there, which is a lot in a 14-day period. You're pretty much sitting every day in ceremony.
Wow.
Um, there was 3 male maestros and 3 female. So there was 6 facilitators in all. And because they speak Shipibo, everything has to be translated from Shipibo into Spanish and then Spanish into English.
Wow.
So the conversations are very limited, but like you get right to the point. There's
Hmm.
not a lot of fluff. So I remember they asked like if there was any women who were on their period. And, I raised my hand because it was day 1 for me, my moon cycle. And she came over and she's like, okay, what day are you on? We figured out how to navigate that. So it was like just beginning. So she only wanted to give me like this much.
This
And I was
tiny
like,
little bit.
no, I've done medicine for 2 years. I've done I've done it when I'm on my period, and I'll take just as much as everybody else, and take just as much as like here I am thinking I know what I'm doing. I'm going to tell this woman who's like probably 65, 70 years old and has been sitting in ceremony for 50 years doing this. I'm going to tell her.
You're wrong. I know what I mean.
So she kind of just looked at me and was like, this is what we're giving you. I'm like, okay.
That's great.
The ceremony, I take this teeny tiny amount and I'm sitting there and I remember thinking to myself, like, this isn't gonna do anything. Like
Right.
I need like 2 cups. And all of a sudden I'm like, and there's like ocean takes over. Like literally, I felt like have you ever been in the ocean when a wave crashes over you and it kind of takes you over and you get stuck
Oh
underneath
yeah.
and you're tumbling underneath and you just like can't get up and you're just waiting for it to crash and be over so you can come up for a breath of air?
Yep.
That was my first experience, my first ceremony down there on a thimble, not even like a quarter of a thimble size
Wow.
dose. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't know anything. But this is
Mm.
uncharted territory.
Yep.
This is the real deal. Like we're in the jungle with no phones, no lights, even. We're just sleeping in these little huts,
Hmm.
right? There's no running water. We're shitting in little buckets in our room. Right? There's cockroaches everywhere. There's spiders everywhere. There's just things crawling in and out of your hut, you know. We're in like the depths of the forest with these people that they're walking around barefoot. And
Mm.
there's spiders this big, like the size of my hand. And I'm thinking, like, who am I to come into this space and think I know anything? So
Humbled.
I got my ass handed to me. We talked about that the other day, like how humbled my ego needs a lot of humbling. So that's been much of my journey is my ego just gets humbled over and over again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was very humbled. And then from there, like I feel like I needed that initial like kind of like smushing down into the
Mm.
ground. She gave me that, but in a loving way, right? Like
Yeah. As she does.
kind of telling me like who's boss.
Grandma, right? That's why it's grandma.
Yeah. And then from there, like each ceremony after that was like because I was in such a more surrendered, humble state of just being like, okay, I'm here for you. You teach me. I'm just gonna step
Mm.
out of the way from here on in. Like I'm just
Mm.
gonna open my arms to you and um like I'm done with that, like trying to tell you what I think I need. Like if I knew what I needed, I wouldn't be here. Right. So after that, I feel like I just had some really beautiful, profound, loving ceremonies out there in the jungle. But I wouldn't have had them, I think, if I hadn't first gotten totally like annihilated, really. My
Yeah.
ego just had to die. I had to forget everything that I had like learned here, everything that I thought I knew about medicine and medicine work and
Mm-hmm.
facilitation and energy work. Like they didn't touch us once in all these ceremonies. There was never a point where they came over and touched us. There was
Yeah.
no energy work being done. It was
Because,
beautiful.
yeah. Did you ask them about that when it was over?
Yeah, so the belief is that these songs that they're all gifted from the medicine when
Mm.
they do their one-on work with the medicine, they're gifted the ekaros. So when they sit in ceremony, we were in this big maloka. It's like a kind of giant circle shaped. I don't know. You know what a maloka is. I don't know
Yeah.
how else to describe it. Um, and we all had our mats, you know, around in a circle. They would come and each facilitator would sit right in front of your mat and you were asked to sit upright and just sit tall while they were in front of you. And then afterwards, after they left, you could lay down again and relax. But every time one of the facilitators came and sat in front of your mat, and they were just sort of like swapping and going along from mat to mat, and they would just go around the circle all night. They were just sharing their ikaro with you. So they would sit and they would sing their particular ikaro, their song. And it was so interesting because each facilitator's ikaro was so different,
Mm-hmm.
but you could like feel the energy. It was wild. And I remember asking them, like, how does this song work? And they were saying that it's like spiritual surgery
Mm.
where the song like comes and floats out of them and then like kind of like will come down and you could feel it floating into your body. Like you could
Wow.
feel the ikara like coming down and like slithering and settling into all the areas. And then at one point I really experienced this where it would pull things up and out. So all of a sudden they're singing this song in front of you and their eyes are closed and they're not really looking at you. They're just singing their ikara and all of a sudden you're like, bleh, bleh. And it's just like
Yeah.
all this purging starts coming out, but they're not touching you. Like they're not really even focused on you. They're just focused on the ikaro. And then your
Yeah.
body just starts to respond to it.
The
It's wild.
vibration. I would think it was the vibration of like their voice and then that being connected with you and like, what do you need to release is like, okay, I'm out. Purge.
And each one was so different too. So like you could feel the different medicine of each facilitator and each ikaro was like, you know, some was like soft and gentle and other was like more like tough and like fast. You know, it was interesting. Yeah.
Oh, now I gotta go to Peru. Okay.
I know. Well, maybe we'll go together. I gotta go
I
back
would
though.
I would love that. Okay, so you were mainly focused on ayahuasca for a little over a year then, is what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think so.
Then your partner got into psilocybin. And then what led you on this path of like all these beautiful medicines that you've worked with? And like, what did you choose next?
Yeah, interesting. So, yeah, so Chris started facilitating the psilocybin ceremonies shortly after we came back. And shortly after we came back, I got pregnant with my first son.
Of course.
So, interestingly, I know, right? And that was another thing Spirit told me while I was there. I was like, it's time. Chris and you are going to make a baby. So we listened and we came home and we made a baby.
Aw.
Yeah, which is interesting because when we left for Peru, we were sort of on the fence. We didn't even know if we were going to be together. We were like, has this relationship run its course? Are we done? Yeah. So we both got very clear signs and signals from Spirit that we were meant to procreate, make a family together. So
Aw.
we did. But it was really interesting because then we come home and like I'm pregnant and Chris starts facilitating these ceremonies because he got like a really clear, calling to work with the psilocybin in that way. And so I'm like busy, like being pregnant and like, like doing nursery stuff and getting diapers, like all the things you do when you're
growing a human. Yep.
Kind of start nesting and you're going very inward in your own little journey. And he's like leading these ceremonies and he knows all of this, so he's not going to be mad at me for sharing, but like these ceremonies started to get out of control. Like they were a mess.
Like what type of mess?
He was giving, so he was at the time, he was giving people in ceremony like 10 grams, which if you've worked with psilocybin, that's a lot. And if you haven't worked with psilocybin, then it's doubly a lot. Like it's considered, I think people call it like a hero dose.
That's more than a hero's dose. Hero's dose is 5
Yeah.
grams.
Yeah. So typically, what we do now is most people are offered between 3 to 5 grams. 3 would be like if you're newer and you want to, kind of dip your toe in the water and see how you respond. 5 and even 6 if you sat with the medicine and like how your body responds to it.
Yeah.
All of that. So brand new people were coming in and getting 10 grams. There was just all sorts of craziness happening. I saw everything from like people just screaming 4 or 5 hours, just like screaming bloody murder at the top of their lungs. Like one guy was like taking punches, like swinging, like forgot who he was, forgot who Chris was, thought that, someone had drugged him or something, was just like swinging punches, trying to run out the back door, trying to run away.
Yeah.
One guy's in my kitchen, like throwing stuff. Just not what you'd like to see happen in a ceremony space, right?
Correct.
So that was kind of what like pulled me in, right? Like again, it wasn't something I was looking for. It wasn't like my calling. I wasn't like, oh, this is what I want to do. I was like, I need to keep these people safe and held and nurtured. Here's what we're going to do. So I like came in with a set of rules. And I was like, if I'm going to be a part of this, this is how it's going to work. Men and women are going to be separated. Men on one side of the room, women on the other side of the room.
Ooh, yeah.
New people are not going to get more than 3 grams. Everyone else will get between 3 to 5 grams. And there has to be 2 main facilitators, Chris and myself, and then 3 support people. Basically depending on like the size of the group and how many new people we had. So my idea was that if we have like 3 new people, we should have at least 3 support people, right? In case they need help, like in the bathroom, like you said, like just they're having a rough time, like just having somebody sit next to you sometimes is just like it's the world to you in that moment. Just having if you're having a really rough ceremony, just having someone just sit next to you. They don't really even have to do anything, but if they're just next to you and you don't feel alone and scared, that's everything, right? So I was obviously coming through this like very maternal period of my life. I just had a baby and wanting to just love everyone and hold everyone and keep everybody safe. So I came in with these like rules and regulations, like like very deep
Mama's
mothering
coming in.
energy. Yeah.
Love it.
And yeah, so like that was kind of what I brought to those spaces and that container for several years. Um, but then, I was in and out a little bit because then I got pregnant again and I had another baby. So kind of like removed myself at times and then came back in. So for me, there was a lot of more like floating in and out of these spaces, which is interesting too, because I found that again, that like egotistical part of me that like thinks I know, right? Like the more that I'm like given the ability to like have control, just who
Mm-hmm.
I am, I'm gonna take that control and I'm gonna keep thinking that I know what's best for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So every time that I sort of got like pulled away or had to take time away, the containers would then morph a little bit, right? Like other people step up, other things become more important, things become a little bit more fluid, things are changing, the people who are coming are changing, right? And then I'd step back in and things would be different. And I'd be like, oh, okay, I guess it doesn't have to be my way, right? Like
Yeah.
I haven't been here in a few months. Things are fine. Everyone's fine, right? They're being
Yeah.
run differently. It's still beautiful, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
there's just been a lot of really humbling experiences for me in the evolution over the last like 5 years or so of, yeah, ceremonial spaces that I've either been a part of, helped out with, co-facilitated, there's just been so much evolution myself, really, like coming from this like very I don't know, like I was all about like boundaries in the beginning. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was just because that's what I was working through. That's what I was dealing with, like not having a felt sense of safety in my own life, in my own body, and just really needing to trust myself and trust my ability to like put up boundaries. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's then what my containers looked like.
Mm-hmm.
But now that like that's not really what I'm working on anymore these days. So my containers don't look like that anymore. There's just a lot more trust and free flowing. Yeah.
That's awesome. So then you've moved into like a more medicinal plant medicine, like with cacao and women's ceremonies in this moment, right?
Yeah. So my life kind of took like a pretty hard turn around COVID time, like when
Mm-hmm.
COVID first hit.
Mm-hmm.
So um my second son, Koa, was born um in a car, by the way. We gave birth to him in a parking lot.
Oh, wow.
It was super cool. And again, I feel like spirit intervened because I did not want to be wearing a mask or like have my partner wearing a mask as we're like giving birth. So of course
Right.
spirit's like, okay, well we'll just do this. So Koa was just born, and then if I want to say like 2-3 months later, my dad passed away. We're in the middle of COVID, like middle of like the lockdown, schools are closed, everything's closed. Suddenly, you go from like having this full life full of all these connections, all of these in-person ceremonial gatherings to like nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I realized for me was what I was deeply missing was not the medicine space. What I was deeply missing was the connection, was the
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And really at that time, I was kind of struggling and moving through my own like sisterhood wounds, my own wounding around women. And it was weird because it was like, on one hand, I was like experiencing like a deep betrayal and like mistrust in that realm. But on the other hand, I was so deeply craving like really intimate connections with women. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just had another baby. I wanted to be raising my toddler and my baby like with other women who were doing that. And I was no longer in ceremonial space, which was like you just feel so connected and one with
Yeah.
everybody in that room. I was like missing that so deeply. And I was like grieving the loss of my father and all of these things. So it just became really clear to me like, for me, it's about women and it's about connecting with women and learning for me, the art of remembering or relearning that women were always, we were always co-facilitating our lives together. We were
Right.
always co-creating. We were always safe spaces for each other. We were
Mhm.
always raising our children together. We were always cooking and cleaning and finding food, and we were doing all of this work together. We were never meant to do it alone. And
Mm,
part of like living in a hyper masculine society is like we're kind of taught that you can do everything by yourself, so why not, right? Like you can be the independent woman, you can. And yes, we can, and we're all doing these things, but why when we can do it all together, and it's so much easier and more fulfilling. So my life sort of shifted as I started to get really into what I call sacred sisterhood. So it's really just holding these intentional circles and spaces for women to come together and hold each other in a way that we don't really do this in society. It's kind of like the sharing circle, where you have the sharing stick, you send the stick around the circle. Each woman, whoever's holding the stick, gets to be heard and seen and felt and witnessed
mm,
in whatever it is that like her body, her heart, her story needs to be witnessed in that moment.
mhm.
Um, no masks, no lies, no drama, just like purely what it is that whatever your part of your journey that you're on right now, like how can we witness you? How can we
Yeah.
hold you? Not take away from it, not add to it, not give you advice, nothing. Just hold you and honor you. And then when you're done and you're complete, we honor you. Oh, you send the stick to the next woman, and we go around the circle, and you get everything. You get the full spectrum of life in
Mm,
these circles. You get the young woman who's like struggling with, body image and all of these things. You get the older, richer stories of women whose children are now, off and leaving the house, or her children are having children. Like you get everything. You get like to see the journey of woman through each person in the circle. And I
mhm.
realized suddenly, like, that was it for me. Like, the medicines taught me so much, and they led me down these beautiful paths of like being able to see myself. But all of a sudden, I realized, like, this is the work I want to be doing. I want to be sitting in these containers and creating sacred ritual just for women. And we can
Mhm.
tap into this, like, with or without medicine, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm doing now. Not kind of, that is what I'm doing now with the Evolve Woman Project. Um, yeah, we're creating like ritualistic, safe circles for women to just come home to themselves.
Mhm.
But I still love medicine work, and I still try to partake where I can. And yeah, I'm still on that journey as well. It just looks a little bit different now.
Yeah. And my personal opinion, women are the medicine as well. So,
Mhm.
especially when we gather, like the women's circles I've been a part of, the magic that happens within them, I'm just like, this is why they want us separated and against one another. Because when we gather, like you can feel the power in the room. I've been to a couple of women's festivals this summer as well. Sorry. And there's babies within these spaces, and the babies are all so calm. Like the whole festival, I'm just like, this is what we are.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do think that, and yes, all humans have masculine and feminine energy
Yeah.
inside of them. I totally, I feel that. But I think there's something really powerful and special about being born a woman,
Mm,
in that we're being called, whether we want to or not, we're being called to be in deeper connection with Mother Earth,
hmm.
because our cycles mirror her cycles. And we simply can't get away from that, no matter how hard we try, right?
Right.
We try to like take these birth control pills and do these things to like make ourselves like on our own cycle. But
Mm,
realistically speaking, our body follows a very secular flow, and it follows the moon exactly 28-day cycles, like to a T. Um, which again, like follows the tides, right? Like we are
Right.
so tied to Mother Nature. Spring, summer, autumn, fall, like our cycle, our hormone cycle follows that to a T. And then similarly, like being able to birth or have the capacity to birth life from nothing. Like I truly believe when you're pregnant, the birth portal and the death portal are like the same. You're leaving your body to go to the spirit world. And when you're birthing, you leave your body, you go to the spirit world, you return back with the spirit of your baby, and you bring form spirit into the material realm, like pure magic.
Yeah.
And that's what Mother Earth is doing constantly. She's constantly bringing spirit into life, prana form into life, and continually like recycling it over and over again. And as women, we're so intricately connected to that cycle. And not that men aren't, but they're on much more of a linear 24-hour cycle, like rise, sleep, rise, sleep.
Yeah.
Where ours is like, a 28-day cycle that changes from day to day. So I really believe like women have a power to create and co-create, and not just like babies, right? That same power that lives in the womb space can create anything. But then when we link up that energy, that creative energy, we like align our energies in circle, in a feminine sacred circle. It's like the cauldron, it's the vortex. It's so powerful.
Ooh, yeah.
We can create anything from this space, but it's been pulled away from our society, and it's been like kind of quieted for so many generations, right? Yep. So it's like, how can we I'm all about just like, how can we slowly start to bring this practice back into being, back into society, but in a way that also doesn't like scare people, right? Because I think, at least for me, when I first started doing women's work, I was all like, fuck the patriarchy, like let's burn it down. Right? And it's like, no, because that's just creating more divisiveness. Like it's just like more hate and war and anger. Like that's not the way of the feminine. The way of the feminine is the opposite. It's just like there's a seat for everyone in the circle. The circle can expand and contract as needed. There's a viewpoint. Everyone's voice is heard. Like no one's higher or lower. We're all equals in the circle. Like that is the way of the feminine. So part of what like my mission now is like, how do we just keep creating these beautiful spaces and circles, whether it's through medicine work, whether it's through the sisterhood circles, these spaces that are just full of ritual, full of connection back to the earth, connection back to ourselves, and really just like full of love. Just a space where we can just like raise that vibration, because it's so hard when you're trying to do it alone. Like I sit here, I do my meditation, I do my prayers and everything at my altar every day, but there's a difference when you like step into a river or a pool that's already flowing, and you just step in, you get caught up by that energy rather than like trying to chug along by yourself and like make that energy go. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Okay. So before I'm gonna go back to ayahuasca. Grandmother ayahuasca. Before we ever really hopped on a call, you were talking about when we take them out of their environment that they act differently. And I would love to know like what's your experience and how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah, I don't really know how I came to that conclusion, but I was thinking about it in like the context, and I had talked about this too, about like set and setting making a huge difference with these, what do you want to call them? I don't know if you want to call them medicines, tools, plants, spirits. I guess for today's purposes, we'll just keep referring to them as medicines, but I think it's like anything. If you do an experiment on, I don't know, a blood pressure medication, and you extract the cells from the human or the rat and you put the medication into the cell, it does one thing. And then they come up with literature and they're like, see how safe this drug is.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you actually put that drug into a live, full rat or human whose whole body and ecosystem is all working together, not just a singular cell, it acts totally different.
Yeah.
It acts completely different. And it goes against all the research and the literature. And I think that that's kind of like what we're coming up against now as a society is like all these drugs and all these things that we think are great because of the way we've studied them in science, where we've like extricated them. That's not, it doesn't work that way when you put them back in their natural element. So I feel like with all of these medicines, one thing that I've sort of learned or experimented or felt within myself is the set and setting makes a huge difference for me. If I am in a group where I feel really safe and loved and held, my experience is one of love and unity. If I go in and there's maybe someone in the ceremony who makes me feel off, or I've had any past like negative experiences with, or even if the room just feels off to me, if it's too dark, if there's no windows, no access to light, that changes the experience for me. And again, maybe this is all just my own stuff. Maybe this means nothing to anybody else. But it really started to hit home for me when I started to practice ceremony and medicine work outside. So Jason used to take us up to the top of this beautiful mountain and we would hike. You bring all your stuff for the day, huge backpack, hike up this mountain. And even just the hike, the preparation, like being with the earth, sweating, feeling the sun on your skin, like kind of making a pilgrimage, right, to the top of this mountain to like honor and pray. And then just to sit with the elements and say, like, I'm going to take this medicine in sort of, I don't want to say in her natural element, because again, we're in the mountains of New Jersey, but those experiences were always so different for me. The downloads or whatever I took away from those experiences, they were never about me. When I'm sitting in like a yoga room and we've got like the music playing and, you know, all of those experiences are very inward for me. And it's all about like me shedding layers of trauma, working through different stories that I've told myself and just seeing things about myself in new light. It's all very like Katie. But when I'm outside and I'm doing medicine in the elements, it's like she goes away. Like it's not about me anymore. Right? Like I just realized all of a sudden, like, oh, I am all of this. This is all me. It's all one. And the lessons that come through for me are just so different. They're just so much more about the universal oneness. And then I start to have these really deeper, like ancestral experiences, you know, or I'll have connections to like pieces of my ancestry, or I'll have like different animal figures come in trying to explain stories to me. Or one experience I remember, I was watching this tree that was right in front of me up on the mountain. And through my ceremonial experience with her, I witnessed the tree go from birth to death in the course of a few hours. I saw her whole life cycle. Wow. And each part of the cycle was epically beautiful. Whereas like previously I would have thought like a dying tree maybe was not as beautiful as a tree in full bloom. So it was like this really powerful experience that I don't think I would have had I been sitting inside of a room or a house or some other space. Yeah. So some of those like more transcendent experiences for me have been outside. And someone recently just shared with me too, I've been working more with San Pedro or Wachuma, which I really, really love that medicine. It's so beautiful. Just very like heart expanding, heart opening. They were saying this medicine grows in the desert. It's out in the sun's beating down on this cactus, you know, day in and day out for years. And then we extract the medicine from this cactus, and then we're going to sit inside and try to get the beauty as we drink this tea, like in artificial light in our four-walled house where this cactus has never grown or lived. Like, take this cactus outside, please, to the sun, to its energetic space, give it its like life and its breath, and see what spirit wants to speak through you, with this medicine out in its natural habitat. And I just, the last couple of times that I've sat outside in the sun with that medicine, it was like, oh, I get it now. I get it.
Yeah.
It's just a returning home.
So how long have you been working with San Pedro then?
I tried it several times off and on over the years. I think I had somewhat of an adverse experience because the first time I ever tried it, I was pregnant. So I immediately was vomiting, but like everything made me vomit. So it was just nauseous for the first 3 months. So I think my brain made this association, like, you don't like San Pedro, but it was just, it had made me thrown up violently the first time I had it. So I kind of stayed away from it for a few years, but then when I found my way back to it, it's just been really beautiful. So I haven't worked with it as much. I'd say maybe like the last year or so. And I kind of came to it roundabout because I was working with another friend of mine who started facilitating MDMA ceremonies, these really beautiful heart ceremonies. And he runs like an amazing, amazing space and container. He's a very gifted musician. He plays like every instrument with skill. And he also just has like a really beautiful heart. And he just hosts these really beautiful, powerful experiences. And again, we know there's so much research right now about MDMA and ketamine and psilocybin, all these breakthrough therapies for things like anxiety and depression and PTSD. And I sat in several of those containers, and I even helped facilitate some of those ceremonies. And they're just really, really beautiful. But what I realized for me was I was sitting in like one ceremony like a month for about, I want to say like maybe 6 months. Towards the end, I realized just how sort of like jacked up my nervous system got from the MDMA. For me, is a little bit too overstimulating. I was having these like really peak experiences and then like crashing for 3 days afterwards. And even trying to do all the supplementation, there's like a regimen of supplements that you can take before and after that help to prevent some of that. Out balancing out your electrolytes and hydration and some 5-HTP, things like that. Which again, I don't think you have to be as concerned about with the plant medicines. Like that kind of just, the stuff doesn't happen as much. I personally was just feeling like super depleted, like loving these beautiful heart opening experiences, but then my body was like crashing afterwards. And just as a mom with 2 toddlers, I was like, I can't do this to myself. I can't have like 3 days after each ceremony where I'm like, no, just like cracked out, like I'm on the couch, like, like tired and wired, that feeling of like, you're so exhausted. You just want to sleep, but your body's like, no, we're not going to sleep. Yeah. So I left those containers. Sadly, I was like, bye guys. I love you so much, but I'm going to like, just go on this repair journey for a little while and work on my own nervous system. And I got really into somatic therapy for a while. And just like sound healing in general, just loving just working with sound, but kind of started dabbling a little bit again with the San Pedro because I had heard that it's the same like heart opening experience. But it's just more gentle. So I kind of started, and then I literally was like, oh yeah, this is it for me. Like, this is my medicine. It just took me 6-7 years to find it. Yeah. And it's not that I don't love all the other medicines, and who's to say that this isn't just another part of my journey and I'll move on to something else. But right now, the San Pedro just feels like very aligned with me and where I'm at on my journey. It's, for me, it doesn't like totally knock me out. Like, it doesn't send me like into the astral field or like laying on my back. I can still like have a conversation. I can walk around. I can feed myself. Like I can be in a ceremonial space with that medicine, but I can also, um, I like have my wits about me in a way that's really
Mhm.
beautiful. So I can, like, we could sit and have a conversation together. Like we could host a podcast together, like on this
Yeah.
medicine. It's so beautifully profound in that way where, um, yeah, there's something really interesting there for me. So I'm hoping at some point in the future to kind of bring that medicine into a sacred sisterhood circle and see like how we could
Mm.
co-create together with that medicine.
I love that. So is somebody like listening to the podcast who's interested in like sitting with any type of plant medicine? Because like some people think, oh, you're doing drugs. And I'm like, nope, nope. That's actually false. What would you say to somebody who's like interested and intrigued and like wants to find a ceremony?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, do your research, do some
Yeah.
research, jump on the internet, get informed, both sides, like people who are all about it, and then also the people who are trying to like warn you about certain things. I think there's validity to all of it.
Hmm.
I always think doing your own research is the most sovereign, powerful thing you can do. But I also think that sitting with yourself in quietness, like
Mm.
quieting down your life to a
Hmm.
point where you're not listening to the outside noise, you're not listening to your friends. You know, maybe you have a whole group of friends that are doing this and they really want you to come because they think it would be great for you.
Yeah.
Um, I think we have that gut knowing that knows before the head space knows. And even sometimes the heart space, I think the gut is probably the gut and the heart are formed before the brain, right? So there's this really powerful intuition, that knows before we even know how we know
Hmm.
whether something is for us or not for us. So I try to like just get really quiet and lean into that space before I'm about to embark on anything
Hmm.
and just get really real with myself too. Like, am I doing this because I don't want to miss out? Like, I have that part of me too, like the FOMO, right? I don't want to miss out on that medicine retreat. All my friends are going. I want to go to that.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's also like for me, like getting real with, okay, I did this medicine several times, like working with the MDMA. I did it several months in a row. And really, if I'm like being honest with myself, it's a beautiful medicine. It makes me feel amazing while I'm in ceremony. It's not serving me in my life when I'm not in ceremony.
Yeah.
And to me, that feels like the opposite of what I'm looking for in my life right now. I'm looking for things that are regenerative, that are giving me energy and wisdom, um, whether I'm working with them or I'm not outside of ceremony. I want to feel good in my life, not all of the time, but most of the time. So I want to walk
Mm.
away from these spaces and these containers more empowered, more in touch with myself, more loving. So some of it is like taking a leap because you're not really going to know how you feel until after you really sat and experienced something. And it may
Yeah.
actually take several times. But I think it's really important to feel, am I doing this because I think it's going to be a quick fix? Like we
Mm.
had talked about this, right?
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people that I talk to, especially like new time people, like first timers before they've done any medicine work at all, they're coming in with, and it's not bad. It's just the society we live in. And I've had this mentality too before. It's such a Western mindset of like, these are my problems. This is what's not working in my life or my symptoms.
Hmm.
I want you to give me a prescription to take this thing to solve this problem.
Hmm.
So a lot of people come into ceremonies with that same mentality of like, oh, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm having trouble focus, you know, I'm stuck in this trauma cycle or loop, whatever the problem. You're now my shaman, who's my doctor, who's going to give me my dosage and tell me what do I take to fix this problem.
Hmm.
And it's very like, I don't want to say it doesn't work, but you quickly outgrow that. The second you sit with a medicine,
Mm-hmm.
you realize like, oh, that's not how any of this works. It's
Yeah.
not. It's like forming a relationship with a human. It's almost like the spirit of the medicine and then who you are, you're coming into relationship with each other.
Yeah.
There's going to be that beautiful, blissful period in the beginning where you're like, oh my God, we're in love.
Yeah.
We want to know everything about each other. I want to do medicine every weekend. And then as you really start to deeply know one another and you're both kind of like coming into deeper and truer relationship, things come up and you're going to start seeing things about yourself. The medicine is going to start showing you more things about yourself. And then at that point, you get to decide, you know, like how deeply you want to keep going, if this is the right path for you, if something else is better, if you're going to outside of the ceremony, step into the real true work of integration, which is nobody wants to do the tough work, but all of the work is outside of ceremony. Ceremony is great. And you can have a hard ceremony and call it work, sure. But the real work starts the second you step out of ceremony. So whatever you learned or saw or felt or processed, how then am I going to live my life differently with this new wisdom that's been illuminated to me? Because if you just go back to your life and you don't change anything about your life after seeing what you just saw,
right?
Can you blame it on the medicine or do you blame it on yourself? Yeah. So there's like lots of pieces and factors here where it's like, yes, you want to feel safe. You want to really get to know your facilitator. You want to have several one-on-one conversations with them, ask any questions you have, make sure that they can answer most of your questions. If there's anything lingering, do your own research and just really make sure that you feel comfortable, because if you don't feel comfortable, your body's not going to be receptive to the medicine or the work. Like I've seen that so many times. I've seen people just sit in ceremony and fight it. Fight the medicine. Like they're just not going to let it. There was one guy, I sat with him in ceremony. We were in a group and I could see when the medicine started to come on and he was just like this, like literally like clenched fists, just like sitting upright. And I came to him and I was like, do you want to leave the container? Like, do you want to go sit in the other room for a little while? We ended up sitting in the other room for 3.5 hours.
Wow.
I honestly, at points, I thought he was going to punch me in the face. Like he just looked so angry. He wanted it to be done. He wanted the feeling to stop. He kept saying like, is this over? Can I leave yet? Can I go?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry, but no, I know this is not the answer you want to hear, but you know, we'll know when it's done. And I remember he fought the medicine. He tried so hard to hold on to that ego.
Wow.
For so many hours. And then right at the very, very end, like I could hear ceremony sort of closing up in the other room. He just started crying. He just broke out in tears, started bawling, crying. And he gave me like the biggest hug. And he was like, oh my God, I don't know why I wouldn't let go. Like, I don't know what. He's like, I can't believe you stayed with me that whole time. Like, he's like, I don't know what I was thinking, like why I was fighting it the whole time. He's like, this is so beautiful and profound, and this is what I needed. And he was like hugging me and he was like, I can't believe you stayed in this room with me. So I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Like maybe that's what he needed, right? Maybe that's exactly what he needed, but I'm just saying like have some awareness of yourself, because however you are in life is how you're going to show up in ceremony.
Yeah.
So if you can't sit and do 10 minutes of breath work or meditate for 10 minutes or accept a piece of criticism or whatever, which yeah, I'm guilty of a lot of these things. Whatever is coming up for you in your life is going to come up for you in ceremony tenfold.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and that's a lot.
I don't know if I answered your question at all. I forget what the question was.
Well, I'm curious. We're almost at an hour. With like doing this work, me personally, like I did coaching, I did therapy, and plant medicine wasn't something that I realized could be so transformative. And like doing that work and then going into ceremony, I saw how much more I could like dive in and dig into the work and see all those things that I was like, no, like we don't talk about that, right? Because that was my trauma. But then going into ceremony, like grandmother ayahuasca was just like, you're gonna look at this. So I like personally think that with the coaching that I did prior to going into ceremony helped me get to like a different level. So do you know people like that do that? Like how does it work in your realm?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I'm so glad that have like you've had that experience yourself, because I think one thing that's become really apparent to me over the years is that as much as I wanted to and tried to be like the tribe mom
Yeah.
and like take care of everybody, not only inside ceremony, but outside ceremony, there was, many years where I was like kind of like on call as everybody's like best friend, therapist. Oh, you're moving through something, call me, we'll talk about it. But
Mm-hmm.
it got to the point where it was just like too much for me, one person, right? But it was just really apparent that there's a need for help in integration, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's like coaching, therapy, group work. Um, it's just a very real need.
Mm-hmm.
It's again, we were never meant to do any of this work by ourselves. We were never meant to go like traditionally back in the day. We weren't sitting in ceremony and then going off and being by ourselves. We were
Right.
sitting in ceremony and then we were eating and then we were working and then we were living. Like we were doing all of this continually together in community. So I think it's important to have those spaces set up for yourself. So if you're going to do work with a facilitator, maybe ask them ahead of time before you start your ceremonial experiences, like, hey, do you have any ideas for me around integration? Maybe they know, like, there's some great therapists here in the area that I, often refer people out to,
Mm-hmm.
people that have either sat in our containers, therapists, or they're holding their own sessions, ketamine therapy, psilocybin therapy, things like that. There's really great therapists, but also just like community, I think, is the biggest piece.
Yeah.
For me, like outside of food and water, my greatest need after that is community. And I think that's actually true for most of us, whether we
Mm-hmm.
recognize it or not. So one of the things that we're trying to do with the Evolved Woman Project really is have a space where you just have built-in community. So if you do go have these experiences, you have a hub, a little like safe container to come back and kind of work through whatever you're working through.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be ceremonial or not. But I also I have some amazing people now that I can refer people out to. My friend Amanda, she does remembrance coaching, which
Mm-hmm.
is so cool. So she can help people as they're integrating their processes around medicine. But then there's also group programs. So my friend who does the MDMA ceremonies, he does a microdosing program, and it's a group program. So you're walking through, I think it's like a 12-week program. Week by week, you're uncovering different layers. Like they talk about trauma work, shadow work. You're going through these different experiences with microdoses as a small little collective.
Mm-hmm.
And just the results that they're having are phenomenal and life changing. But I think the part of the piece of why these containers are so powerful is not necessarily the medicine. I think it's the community. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
having a place that's safe, like you're saying, where you can go talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
I have seen medicine work re-traumatize people, and usually when that happens, that re-traumatization, it's because you take a person who has so much trauma that their nervous system is very constricted.
Mm-hmm.
Their ability to look at certain things has become very narrow. And then you put them in a medicine ceremony where, like, I've felt this way before, where you're almost in a dark room and all of a sudden the medicine turns the light on and you see all of these things that are in the dark room that you didn't know were
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God. And then the light turns back off. Even when the light's off, you can't unsee what you just saw.
Yeah.
even if you try to go back to your unlife, you're not unseeing it. It's dark, the light's back off, you're back in your life, but you've now seen everything. So your nervous system goes and it contracts even harder. And you
Yeah.
go into an even deeper state of constriction unless you have places where you can come and you talk about these experiences a little bit and you open up and it's safe, and then you can contract again, and then you can talk about it a little bit more and it's safe, and your body's like, okay, it's safe, and you come back and then you talk about it a little bit more and it's safe. So I think like that's really how, what I'm learning now about traumatic experiences and how the body responds in somatic therapy. These sort of like these ideas of like breakthrough experiences and peak experiences, and like one ceremony is 30 years of therapy. I don't really prescribe to that anymore. I think like anything, we're wired to have a little bit of a growth experience coming out of our comfort zone and then coming back to comfort. And slowly that comfort zone and our capacity to hold our trauma and capacity to see ourselves gets bigger over time, but it only gets bigger if we have a safe place to come back to.
Yeah.
And I think safe places are actually safe people and community. So like, to me, that's the biggest piece. And it kind of always has been, but maybe the way I went about creating safety for people has changed a lot. Yeah, but I definitely think I never recommend anymore. Like people will come to me and they're like, I want to do this work, but I don't want to tell my partner. I don't want to tell my kids. I don't want to tell anybody. Like they want to come do medicine in secret to fix their life. And I'm like,
that doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Don't do that, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is listen to your gut, follow your heart. If you're talking to a practitioner and you feel good about them, and then you just have that feeling of like, this feels right. And then just making sure that after the fact, after the ceremony, you have someone to go to, at least a therapist, or, you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily a therapist. It could be like, you know, a life coach, someone like you, someone like Melissa, you know, who's doing coaching as well with the Unlifted group, energy worker, like just some place where you know that you can go and be held and you're not alone with everything you just uncovered about yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Or the nature of reality. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that that's really important. And having like that group container to talk to after when I did my ceremonies, there was nobody to talk to except for like either people I kept in contact with within the space or like people who had done it prior to that I was friends with. So thank God I was living in Costa Rica and like everybody basically that I knew had done it. Right. So I was like, okay, so this is what happened. And like, how do I like implement this into my life now? So that's where I find that missing piece of like, where's your safe space after for the integration? So yeah, it's super important.
Yeah. And I love what you're doing because I think you're also creating a safe space here for people. So like if they don't have that, if they don't have like the group who's going to hold them, they can listen to this podcast. They can feel connected to all the different people. They can reach out to you. There's going to be lots of people you can like direct them to, you know?
Oh yeah. I'm on a mission. I didn't, like I said, 5 years ago, this was not what I thought my life was going to be, but it's like, you listen to spirit and you're like, okay, I'm going to an ayahuasca ceremony. I thought it was just a ceremony.
I know.
Which is just amazing. I feel like this conversation is just like the surface of the information that you have. So I would love to have you back to chat more. So much to share, and like I can tell that you have so much knowledge with your experience, so it was such a pleasure having you on. People want to find you. How do they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Evolved Woman Project. We also just launched our website yesterday, so apparently we have a website now as well. Yeah, but mostly Instagram would be the way to follow us.
Awesome. Okay, and everything will be in the show notes. And then one last question. If you could give your first ayahuasca ceremony like one word to describe it, what would you use?
Oh, that first one. I'm gonna just say beautiful.
Mm,
Absolutely beautiful. Hmm.
amazing.
I'll throw in gentle as well.
Yeah, right. And that's why you're working with Wachuma.
Yeah.
Such a gentle medicine. I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your
Thank
energy. And
you.
I appreciate you so, so much for joining me today on the podcast. And if you want to find Katie, everything is in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.